Hey guys, so today we're speaking with Blue Zoo animator Oz Durose, really good friend of mine, an amazingly talented animator. We're speaking about a personal project of his, tips, tricks, techniques, workflow, animation, Spider-Man. It's a really good episode and yeah, hope you enjoy the video. Hey Oz.
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
You're with Blue Zoo at the moment, Oz. How did that go, applying for Blue Zoo and getting in?
Effectively, I just saw that they were looking for animators. They're the sort of guys that I've wanted to work with, like, since I graduated, and I graduated, like, almost 12 years ago now. That's absolutely terrifying to kind of say, you know. So yeah, I just saw that they were hiring, so I thought, you know, any chance that I get to, I will apply for those guys, and I will apply until they finally give me a job. Anyway, they kind of got in contact with me. They wanted an interview, so sorted that out. They wanted to see, the majority of my show reel was very much kind of like personal projects, and recently I've done Anim Squad workshop thing. So that was really good to learn from an ex-Disney animator, you know. But it meant that my show reel was majority kind of personal work. And they asked me specifically, we want to see stuff that you've done professionally. I sent over a couple of pieces that I was quite happy with. One of which, I'm not sure whether you were around at NSC, but the Weather Pod stuff.
It was
this fun little kind of red character that was had a lot of kind of personality. So I sent that over there. They were really happy and interested with that. Anyway, they gave me a senior role, so it's been really good fun.
I was going to say, I couldn't have imagined you having too much difficulty getting into a studio like that. Makes complete sense. You're a top animator, and that's a really nice, from what I've seen on social media and stuff, they have a very nice, you know, culture and team, and very friendly and that sort of thing. So I can imagine you fit in absolutely perfect.
I mean, I've only been there a couple of weeks, but I'm loving it, and I'm really enjoying the people that I'm working with and the project that I'm working on. So yeah.
Nice. There's nothing better than having a nice team of people around you. What we're having a chat about today, Oz, will be one of your personal projects. Was this in the show reel by any chance or not?
I think it might be. Yes, I think it might be.
Well, when I saw this, I thought, we've already done a Spider-Man chat, but I just can't help it because I just love it. So we're talking about Spider-Man versus Rhino. I don't know if I've seen a snippet or the whole thing, I'm not sure, but a snippet or the whole thing is great to chat about.
So this is the Spider-Man animation. This was something that I did in 2018, and I wanted to kind of play around with this a little bit more. I wanted to do more than just like kind of the single animations. I wanted to kind of get back into doing something as a larger kind of shot. So I downloaded one of Kyle Figgins' Spider-Man rigs. And yeah, I mean, all of his rigs, he's got a lot of rigs, and they're all so cool and have so much kind of personality. I think that I was drawn to Spider-Man because at this point, I think the Spider-Man PS4 game had just come out. And so there was a lot of hype for that. So what was interesting was that I was working on this animation and kind of creating something that I liked the look and feel of. And then I saw that the Spider-Verse film, like I think I saw one of the very, very early trailers, and I was like, I need to emulate that. This was a personal project. This was something in my spare time. I sat down and I thought, right, okay, I want to do something. One thing that I think is key to kind of think about is that no matter where you are along your kind of career trajectory, there are always things to learn. So what I did is an exercise where basically I grabbed hold of a League of Legends cinematic animation. And I thought, right, okay, I want to go through this frame by frame, and I want to kind of see what they're doing, and I want to replicate it. As such, like, you know, I don't necessarily have any real kind of ownership of this animation, because on the most part, even though I physically did it in Maya, I didn't necessarily kind of put in all of the creative elements of it. This was just a way of like kind of figuring it out. So it was a really fun experiment to try and figure out what what the animators working on these great cinematics that I've watched and I've loved since they've started coming out, seeing what they've been doing as animators and then saying, right, okay, well, how can I do that myself? So that's why I then decided to, all right, taking a couple of these ideas, the things that I've kind of figured out through this, I wanted to try something myself. And I came up with this top one. Now, obviously it's Spider-Man. An amazing thing about Spider-Man as the character is that, he can create some remarkable poses. Every pose that Spider-Man has in the comic books are instantly recognizable as a Spider-Man pose. The line of actions are all over the place in such an interesting and kind of complex yet simplistic sort of way. So I was like, right, okay, well, I want to play around this. All of the stuff that I've kind of come up with, all the stuff that I've learned from the League of Legends exercise, I want to kind of put into a short animation of my own. And I think that's another kind of very interesting point. If you're going to do a personal project, don't make a short film. Don't do an epic kind of 20-minute piece, because certain people probably can do that on their own. But my goodness, it's just such a lot to kind of put into something. Personal projects are all about momentum. And if you've got momentum, then you can finish it. If you have this if you've been working on something for 6 months, then I can imagine that your momentum is starting to kind of fail. And even if it's just something to experiment with, you start to get to that point 6 months in and you're thinking, well, why am I actually doing this? For me, if you want to test something out, just do something quick. I mean, I can't tell you how many frames this is, but this original kind of animation, which is super, super quick because I was doing it from a wide shot. It was just a way of kind of experimenting with those poses and really pushing this character and kind of trying to get the character through as well as this kind of fun and dynamic kind of, lead your eye around the screen. He attacks, then he jumps off, and then he springs back, playing around with the timing and the spacing within those poses to create something really, for me, appealing, really good fun, really at the end of the day. But there was one thing that I didn't implement that I did learn about from doing the League of Legends exercise, and that was the nature of the cinematic shot. It's difficult to make something feel cinematic when it's just from one camera angle.
These cameras that you've put into this, were they dressed to that just one animation, or did you have to sort of tweak bits to the camera, or was the cameras literally just placed with that whole clip as one bit?
So originally, I just put the cameras in, and then I realized when I rendered out a playblast that it was so fast. It was so fast. I mean, it works when you're looking at it from a distance because your eyes can follow it. The spacing seems kind of smaller because it's all on the screen. The first shot where he's doing that swinging and then that kind of that backflip thing, that with the original timing was just ridiculously fast.
Have you got the Maya scene for us to see this?
See what I've got, because once again, this was kind of a little personal test. I didn't necessarily get everything set up professionally and neat.
I love that punch that he does, that super stretch to the jaw punch.
It's poses like that, and also kind of coming down. An interesting thing that I learned from the League of Legends thing was that the stretch to come down and then the land in a straight
over one frame. It's so punchy, so powerful.
But it works. Yeah, exactly. This is the first frame of this shot. And interestingly, you've got a couple of frames of this shot where you don't actually see Spider-Man at all. But the camera is leading that. It's giving the impression, even though we've seen before that kind of Spider-Man is now on his kind of downward trajectory. Even though we're not seeing Spider-Man here, we still get a sense of that trajectory just because the camera's doing it. And then his feet appear. Seemingly out of nowhere, his feet appear quite far. Then, very interestingly, the second shot, his feet practically in the same sort of place. There's not a lot of spacing between his feet on those two frames. And I think, once again, this is probably one of the things that, looking back on it, I would have probably wanted to change. But then you're going straight from frame 39 like this to frame 40, where he's fully down in that down position, yeah, and then kind of like goes back into the wind up. There's not even really any kind of overlap on it. But when you're kind of watching it through, it kind of feels snappy. Well, because it is snappy, it's literally going from one impossible frame to another impossible frame, you know. But it works, you know. When you're watching it back, it works, and there's not really much else I can say about it. Setting up these cameras was very much a case of like, kind of, I wanted, as I was saying, like, kind of, if this was a comic, how would I want this to look, you know? Getting this really kind of low angle here, because that's a very kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe style shot anyway, into this idea of like something that, you know, these two characters are kind of filling up a similar sort of amount of the frame, and then that kind of shoot off into that hyper stretch. I know that, I mean, everything is dislocated there, and then smash back. And actually, when you go through frame by frame, you can tell that actually, like, some of the in-between poses are really horrible, like that. So yeah, if you can see this now real time, it's ridiculously fast. As soon as he does that punch and then that kind of kick, you know, it was too much, too messy, you know, and it wasn't telling the story. Even though it told the story from the far frame, this was horrible. So this is the slowed down version, okay, from the far view. It's less punchy. It still has all of the elements there, you know, but you can kind of tell that I just kind of took the original animation and then just kind of stretched it out, just kind of feel with it. It loses something that the original, the quicker one had, but when seen in this position, that timing, it works. Now that you've got the more close-up, the more kind of dynamic camera set. I suppose maybe there's an element of like parallax or whatever it's called, you know, when you're kind of on a train and things are moving faster because they're closer to you, that sort of thing, you know. And so I think definitely when you're doing animations from like kind of one set point of view, you know, they're going to feel different to when you kind of then start kind of pushing in with cameras.
This would be the time where if it went to a director and they were looking at a shot and they really thought, for example, when he's about to shoot back down to Rhino with a kick, you know, these would have been
this shot
like that. This may, for example, be a moment where the director says, "Oh, can we just hold on to this a little bit more and then shoot quick?" You know, there's in the camera shots where they can play around with these moments for certain reasons. And it's clear this is a perfect example of that.
And actually, yeah, looking at the different camera lenses, that was kind of key to kind of setting up these compositions as well, you know, because once again, if you're trying to emulate his Spider-Man comic feel, you're going to want to push and pull that perspective as much as you can, because, you know, it's native to Spider-Man. And so, yeah, like kind of experimenting with that and then seeing how that affects the timing, how it affects the feel of the timing, the feel of the animation that you've created. And yeah, definitely having to kind of tweak things to make sure that they work for the camera. It's an interesting thing with games animation. You know, in games animation, on the most part, you're able to look around the character as much as possible, or the enemies, or whatever it is. You know, everything needs to work from all angles, you know, and therefore you can't cheat. When you work into a camera, cheat as much as you want, you know, as much as you can, as long as it looks good. Let's say here, for example, I think I may have had to dislocate his shoulder to be able to get this, or like kind of do something to mess up that pose, but to make it work from the camera angle. And you can get away with that. And that's great. That's like another tool in the tool belt,
The amount of cheats and bending of bones and snapping of ribs and joints, it's every day, isn't it?
I love bending bones, and I love kind of, making things like popping joints and all that sort of stuff. It's just great fun because it really allows me to kind of make the pose as silly or as appealing as I want to,
How much sort of influence and obviously the Into the Spider-Verse was, you say you saw the trailer. Did you create this just after, or was it pretty much at the same time and then that came out? And how much influence did that have?
The key thing that I found really interesting from the Spider-Verse was just these kind of, these splash frames that they had, and like seeing that on a teaser trailer for an animated film was like, whoa, never seen anything like that before. So effectively, that was the way that Spider-Verse influenced me. Was just through the creation of these things. I didn't add in any of the kind of the shot on twos or block style kind of animation, because realistically at that point I didn't really know much about what Spider-Verse was going to be. And so, yeah, for every hit, I think I've got maybe about 2 frames, just this illustration, just enough to kind of like separate it up and have something completely different to the monotonous grey of a playblast. But yeah, that was like kind of creating those was a very, very quick and easy Photoshop job. I've had people ask me before, like kind of, oh, how did you do that? Like kind of what crazy Maya wonders have you been able to do to get those shaders? I'm like, nah, mate, I just use the pen tool in Photoshop. Heck, it makes it look how I want it to look. So, once again, kind of why bother figuring out loads of difficult stuff when you can just cheat it?
And it's surprising how much just one frame like this adds to the impact and the stretch and the pose and that hit.
Well, this is another interesting thing. I'm not sure whether you've ever seen any of the New Frame Plus videos on YouTube. There's a guy who basically goes through a lot of games animations and analyzes them. And they're fascinating, absolutely fascinating and wonderfully produced videos. I think one of them he did on Super Smash Bros. And how the animations, you need this really kind of quick anticipation straight into the hit, but then to give that hit more impact, hold on that pose, hold on that frame for like a couple of frames, and then like kind of hold back. So actually adding these as 1, 2, and then back into the rest of the movement, just like kind of adding 2 frames in there. It's a similar sort of process. You kind of like adding to the impact of that hit by focusing and kind of cutting the flow and saying something jarring is happening here, which kind of brings impact to those hits. So yeah, I mean, really great, really fun project. As I say, I think I did it over about a couple of days, maybe 3 days. Poured a lot of energy into it throughout that time. But that's just because you have something. The momentum was up. You have something that you're chewing on, and you just want to kind of keep on going at it until you get to the point where you're like, right, okay, publish it to Twitterverse, and see what happens there.
Talking about momentum and stuff on a personal project like this, was it like hard to pull yourself away from the computer because you had that much momentum, or was you just?
Yeah, at times when you get really into something, then you run the risk of never blinking. You're just like constantly eyes wide open and just like kind of absorbing what you're putting into it. And I think this was definitely kind of alongside that. I was enjoying it so much, but once again, because I had that momentum and I didn't allow myself to kind of get bogged down with it or over worry about it. And I knew that it was going to be done in a couple of days, because I think this was actually during downtime at work. So I was actually at the works computer doing this stuff and being like, right, okay, this is me effectively training myself in animation. But once again, because I was at work, it meant that I could quite easily drag myself away because I had a train to catch, You're kind of forcing yourself to do that. It's more difficult now, and I'm sure that everybody kind of recognizes this when you're working from home. Those boundaries start to become blurred. It's very helpful for me that, my computer, my setup isn't in my bedroom or in the place where I kind of relax. And so I can just say, you know what, I'm done for the day now. I'm going to go next door into the living room, and that's it. And then I'm going to play Spider-Man, Another important thing was being able to share it with people. I was sharing with my colleagues at the time. They were filled with a lot of encouragement, and if something wasn't working, then they would kind of definitely say, oh, have you thought about this? It was the same on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. I think it was on LinkedIn that I gave a shout out to animators, just hashtag animators, and hopefully an animator would see it. That's how the internet works. And I got a piece of feedback that I'm sure kind of influenced and said, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. He feels too light. That was something that I was struggling with, actually, with the League of Legends one. She felt too light, and I didn't understand how to make her feel heavier. And then somebody said spacing. I hadn't fully grasped the importance of spacing in animation. Effectively, you can keep the same timing, over 30 frames, but make something feel faster and snappier by kind of how much space there is between the objects from frame to frame. Just like kind of making the spacing wider as she's kind of jumping down and landing, and I use exactly the same thing with the Spider-Man one. Just doing those, just adding those things in, gave it that weight, gave it that kind of that impact. So yeah, it was not only useful to go away and kind of get a fresh pair of eyes on it for myself, but also getting other people's eyes on it and kind of getting their kind of understandings and, feeding off their wisdom was very, very useful. The odd occasion you'll get a couple of real good gems, and they really kind of help impact the work that you're doing.
And where can people see? Where can people find these bits of work and stuff?
So I would probably say first bet would be ozdurose.com. That's kind of my personal website, and I throw as much stuff up there as I can. Fingrim Studios is an animation studio that I've set up fairly recently, the aim of which is to effectively provide a service of freelance animation to people who need it. If you need an additional animator on your job for a month or two, then give us a shout and we'll kind of figure something out.
Well, that's really. I love that talk, guys. I could listen to people talk about their personal stuff all the time. So I'm just trying to do this once a week, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is really cool. Kind of just having kind of weekly chats with people in animation or in different kind of fields. It's a great thing to do, and yeah, it's just great to be kind of part of it. So cheers for asking us to be part of it.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. So thank you so much for your time.
All right. Cheers, man.
Nice one, Oz. Take it easy. Bye, Oz.
And you. Bye-bye.
Bye, buddy. Hey, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you like this sort of content, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. And in our next video, we're speaking with previs artist and storyteller, filmmaker Martin Bell. And we go behind the scenes into one of his personal projects, talking about how he creates pre-visualization for film and how he's creating previs using Unreal Engine for his own feature film. So look out for that video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.